Not my story, but a friend from college. It happened in the house her family lived in for a while when she was a kid. It had an attic that ran the length of the house, and the access was through a door in the back of her brother's closet at the far end. Their parents forbid them from messing around up there because it was filled with boxes from previous tenants. The landlord said, "I don't care if you look through them, but I don't know what's in there, so do so at your own risk." Also, if someone got hurt by something falling on them or something, it might go unheard or unnoticed until too late. To make things weirder, at the very back end of the attic was a little locked room. It was right above their bedroom. Well, my friend starts getting woken up at night by the sound of someone moving around quietly, which always turns into rapid, quiet creaking, almost right above her. She figures it's her brother. Because he'd have to cross over their parents' room as well, she figured he'd get caught eventually. She just did her best to ignore the sound or think about what a teenage boy might be doing to cause it. One day during the summer, she slept in on a weekend. When she woke up, she looked outside and saw her parents working on the big produce garden they'd put in. She went and got some breakfast, then went back up to her room to play with her Game Boy. For the first time after months of getting woken up, she heard the noises during the day. Curious to catch him in the act, she crept to her brother's room. The closet door was open, and the access to the attic was open too. She quietly went up the steep and narrow stairs until she could just peek in and saw first that a path had been cleared. Then she noticed that the mattress her dad had wedged in front of the little room had been slid aside. Most surprising, however, was that the locked door at the back was ajar. Her brother stuck his head out, saw her right away, and smiled, calling her over. "You gotta come see this." He then pulled back inside of the dark room. She said that the only other time she had ever felt so instantly, totally, instinctually afraid like that was her first time hearing a cougar scream at night in the woods. She instantly backed and flew all the way downstairs and to the yard to tattle on her brother, only to see him hauling stuff around and helping their parents, as he'd been all morning and afternoon apparently. She was so shocked and afraid of not being believed, even though they asked why she looked so terrified. She simply answered, "I think there's someone in the attic." When pressed, she said she heard footsteps and saw that the door was open when she went to look. Dad swore and went and got his gun from his truck and instructed them to wait for 15 minutes. If he didn't come back out, they were to all get in the truck and drive to the neighbor's place a couple miles down and call the police. There were no cell phones back then. He went in, and after a very anxious wait, he came back out pissed as hell, demanding the kids fess up who had been messing around up there. Both denied it, and the family went to look as a unit, with my friend reluctantly bringing up the rear. Someone had indeed pushed all the boxes and the mattress out of the way. The door was indeed unlocked and open. All that was inside, no light, no window, was an old rocking chair, and everything covered in decades of dust, with no sign that anyone but them had been in the room at all. There were no streaks and no footprints, just some ancient mouse crap and an old chair. The brother pointed to this as proof he couldn't have been the one, because how would he leave no signs? In the absence of other explanations, their dad didn't buy it. Brother got grounded for the next couple of weeks for breaking the rules and sneaking around, and my friend refused to go back to the attic the rest of the time they lived there. She went sleeping on the couch in the downstairs living room when she could get away with it, because the sound of steps and the rocking would still regularly wake her up. She told this story at a couple of gatherings as an answer to similar scariest thing to happen to you prompts, but details left out included some eerie notes. Well into adulthood, years and years after they moved away, she still has recurring nightmares about that attic. It's always the same dream, but it goes one of two ways. In the dream, it's like she's on a rail, and no matter how she tries to stop or go backward, she just smoothly glides along. It goes up the stairs, down the hall, into her brother's room, and up the attic steps, unable to close her eyes or turn away. The way it usually goes is that she is frozen at the point right where she can see into the attic, and the door to the little room is open. Her brother's smiling face emerges, but she knows in her heart it's not him. The not brother grins and beckons, and the attic gets shorter and shorter, her unable to turn or run away until she is just within arm's reach. Just as he lunges for her, she wakes up drenched in a cold sweat and crying. The other way it goes, it's the same all the way until the attic, but then, when her brother's face peeks out, she knows it is him. In this version, though, he's covered in thick dust, his hair, his skin, etc., except that tears have streaked his face. He calls out to her, but makes no noise. She can't understand what he's trying to say, except for 2 words. "Help me." Then something pulls him back inside, and she is frozen, knowing in her gut that something terrible is happening to him, but she can't save him. This goes on until she wakes up racked with guilt and fear. I met her brother at a barbecue and asked him about the house and the little room. Apparently, he never heard his sister's side of the story. I also didn't tell him the details I know. He swore he never went up there for fear of spiders and was pissed he was grounded but innocent because it meant missing out on some summer stuff he and friends had planned. He always assumed it was a prank by his sister, where she panicked and lied when their dad reacted all serious and got his gun. I asked him if he remembered anything weird about the house, and he said the only thing he thought was weird was that he'd wake up knowing he dreamt, but not remember the dreams at all. He added that it was only weird because he doesn't normally have a sense of dreaming at all before or after that house. However, while they were there, the feeling happened all the time. Otherwise, he had only good or neutral memories from there. I never got the impression she was lying. It always spooked me hearing the story because, assuming all details are correct, there are too many big questions left unanswered. What was my friend hearing at night? Why was the door to the attic open? Who moved all the boxes? How did the little room unlock when none of them had the key? If someone had gone in or come out, how were there no marks in the dust? And the most important question, if that wasn't her brother, who the hell did she see up there? The first house I moved into out of high school while going to college was a very old, very small house in a town that dated back to the Civil War. I lived there with 3 other guys since rents were high, but we made it work. The house was built on a hill and had a small driveway in front with a U-shaped driveway in back. It had a full basement and was owned by someone with multiple rental properties in the area. They told us we had full access to the upstairs, but that they used the downstairs for storage and to never go down there because it was full of their stuff. We never questioned it because the rent for this particular location for our area was low. We were still technically on campus, but our house was surrounded by other college students, so we could have parties whenever we wanted to. Everything was great until we started having unwanted visitors. At first, things were pretty easy to ignore or completely write off. A roommate home by themselves would walk into a room and the lights would be on when they were home alone and hadn't flipped any switches. Someone else would hear a faucet turn on and off in a room with no one in it. We tried to do what research we could at the time and found that water pressure can cause faucets to do some crazy things on their own, and that power surges can do similar things with flickering lights. Unfortunately, things kept getting stranger. At one point, one roommate, who was home alone, got out of the shower, looked into the mirror to start shaving, and noticed that someone else stepped out of the shower behind him and left the room. He searched the house but couldn't find anyone else home at the time. Later on, a different roommate had several items go missing out of his room, including his keys and a pocket knife. He later found them in our microwave. Again, no one else was home at the time. Me, personally, I got home on a day when nobody else was at the house for the next couple of hours in between classes. There was a folding chair on the front porch next to the door, and I had an armload of books. I set the books down in the chair, unlocked, and pushed open the front door, turned and picked up my books, and when I went to walk into the house, the door slammed in my face. I thought the wind had caught the door and went to open it, but discovered that the door had locked itself again, both handle and deadbolt. Last of all, Three of us were sitting together on a couch watching TV when we heard a loud, heavy thud as though something had been dragged off of a bed in a back bedroom. All three of us later confirmed that we could distinctly hear both footsteps walking through the house, as well as the sound of something heavy being dragged behind. Last of all, the back door opened and slammed shut, even though we were all in the living room, and there was supposed to be no one else in the house. A week later, we started to smell gas in the house. We called the authorities in the middle of the night, and they searched the house with us waiting on the front lawn. Finally, they told us that they couldn't find a gas leak and asked us to open the basement. We had never been in there at our landowner's request, but since the fire department was asking, we opened the garage door. Right in front of us was a Honda Shadow motorcycle with a large pool of gasoline underneath it, where the gas tank had apparently leaked underneath it and the rest of the house. The firefighters saw this and decided to leave, while we were left to look around the rest of the basement. Most of what we found was shelves and shelves of canned vegetables, but in the very middle of the floor, under everyone's bedrooms, was a mortuary table and a second device. I'm still not sure what the second device was. It was cylindrical, with a small viewport in the front door. It seemed to have some places on the back for hoses or pipes to connect to it, although nothing was attached when we found it. It was about the right size for a couple of 2-liter soda bottles to fit inside. Soon after, we found out that our landowner worked night shifts at a local hospital. Whatever it might have been, we decided that enough was enough, and we all decided to move out as soon as our leases were up. I was the last one there, and I promise that the last 7 days I spent there alone are the longest days I've spent anywhere since. I am a self-described cynic who doesn't believe in the supernatural, but I can also admit when I have absolutely no explanation for a set of events. I'm sure some scientists will be able to explain everything that happened to me now that many years have passed, but I don't need their explanations anymore. I just accept that being in old houses alone is not a good idea and do my best to avoid them altogether. I live in a house with 8 people in total. It's quite a large, old, Victorian-style house. We're all students, but as it's summer, people have started to move out. For the last week or so, there's only been 3 of us in the house. Myself, my boyfriend, and another housemate. With our house being so full of people, it's easy to put strange things happening down to it being any one of those 7 other people. But now there's only 3 of us. I'm becoming increasingly paranoid that there's someone living in our house who shouldn't be. Here are some of the events that make me think so. First, there's an attic above our shower. You can see the little black attic hatch, which has always been a crack open since we moved in. I know it's been open because my boyfriend would get creeped out by it, and he'd tell me so. But recently, the crack shut. Now, this house has very high ceilings. I'm only 5'2", so there's no way I can reach up there. My other housemate isn't much taller, and, although my boyfriend is more so, he probably still isn't tall enough, and that hatch creeps him out too much for him to go opening it. I've confirmed with him that he didn't, so there's that. Next, 4 out of 8 people in our house smoke, so there's often tobacco and rolling papers lying around the front room or the kitchen. For a long time now, since maybe January or so, we've been finding these really badly rolled cigarettes in the mornings. My boyfriend and I would come downstairs in the morning and we'd find one of these shitty cigarettes rolled, just sitting in the tobacco. It's like someone had rolled it, then decided it isn't good enough to smoke and just left it for us to find. At first we had a laugh about it, assuming it was one of our housemates who smokes only when drinking and was attempting to roll secretly because of embarrassment. But then that housemate left. A few days earlier, my boyfriend bought me a lollipop. It's one of those oversized swirly ones. He and I were smoking cigarettes in the kitchen when I put the lollipop on the fridge. Cut to a little later, we go back and see that yet another one of these badly rolled cigarettes has appeared. Only this time, it has been half smoked and stubbed out on the lolly. Neither me or my boyfriend would have stubbed out a cigarette on a lolly he bought me. We were the only people in the house at the time, or should have been. The next example isn't exactly scary, but it's still another odd example of something happening. Our recycling bins were an absolute mess. My BF and I came back from the shop one day, and they were all neatly stacked and tidy. Weird. Now, this is the thing that has weirded me out the most out of everything for some reason. My boyfriend and I had been away for the weekend, and one of our housemates was just coming back the day before we were. He said the house was creeping him out a bit, so he turned off all the lights on the day he was there alone and just stayed in his room until we got back. My BF and I get home, find our other housemate, start chatting, and mentions of odd happenings like those I mentioned came up. So we're all a bit confused, maybe a bit creeped out, but more intrigued than anything. All three of us chat about other stuff and end up going to bed at the same time. My boyfriend and I were awake in bed for a while, so we would have heard my housemate leaving his room if he had done so, but we didn't. I was the first one up the next morning, and I headed downstairs. I noticed something straight away that was not there the night before. Tiny little barcode stickers from some nail art sticker sheets I had were all stuck on the sofa. There were lots of them, just arranged in this sort of hourglass number 8 kind of shape. The first thing I did was to get my housemate and ask him if he's been downstairs. He said no, and I showed him the stickers. He's as weirded out and intrigued as I am. My boyfriend wasn't up yet, but just to check, I went and asked him if it was him. Nope. We've tried taking the stickers off, but they're little bastards to pull off, and they leave marks on the sofa. Bear in mind, we have a damage deposit on this house that we all want back. So, it's safe to say no one in our house who wants that money back is going to damage furniture like that. All of these things are alongside banging and sounds like footsteps or taps being turned on or things being dragged across the floor. The sounds are worrying enough, but I always put it down to it being an old house. Maybe it's one of the other many people we know living there, or even the neighbours. There's another point of interest which I only realised lately. My boyfriend lost his house keys a good while back. Anyone could have picked up these keys and found out where we live, possibly. I'm currently at my parents' house, but the more I stay at my own house, the more it seems the only explanation for these things happening is there is someone living in our attic, and it scares the hell out of me, so much that I refuse to check. Please drop a like and subscribe to Eerie Echoes for more horror stories. As always, thank you for watching.